Well, hey everybody, welcome to the Stoic Fellowship podcast. My name is Patrick Barry. I'm here with my co-host Kelly Rodriguez, and our guest today is Chris Spaleta. I meant to ask how you pronounce that. Is it
It's all right. Spaleta.
Spaleta? Yeah,
Yeah, Spaleta. Spaleta.
Spaleta. Great. The facilitator of the Ontario Stoa. Thanks. Hey Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
So, So yeah, we already got started like talking about all kinds of things before we even started recording here. So maybe we can just kind of pick up where we left off. Chris was telling us about the store that he runs in Ontario, and some of the things they do to keep the conversation productive and not uh, wander off onto political tangents that things tend to do. But
Yeah,
maybe we can get to that eventually. But Chris, yeah, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, how you got interested in Stoicism, how this group that you're helping to run got going. Give us the backstory here.
sure. I've been interested in philosophy, particularly life philosophy, my whole life. My dad did a master's in philosophy back in the day, and he's been super interested in talking to me about it since I was a little kid. So that was always what we got together and chatted about. And then I studied some humanities in university, and it just kept going from there. And then recently during the pandemic, or I guess not recently, I guess it's been years, but relatively recently, um, some of my friends started getting interested in philosophy, which was brand new. I've got a group of friends that goes back we've been hanging out for 30 years now. So it was interesting to see a few of them start to think about and talk about philosophy because we shared a lot of things, but that wasn't one of them. So we started diving in. We started having Zoom calls with each other during the pandemic, just to hang out, and philosophy kept coming up. So we started looking into what kinds of philosophy are interesting to us, what kind of philosophy are useful, and one that kept coming up was Stoic philosophy, and just how practical and useful it is. And one of my friends in particular, Liam Hartman, wanted to keep doing a regular meetup to chat about Stoic philosophy and how it works in our lives. And the other friends slowly lost interest or went off on their own journeys. I shouldn't say lost interest. This is kind of a tangent, but I've found that sometimes when people are talking about philosophy, life philosophy, like Stoic philosophy, um, they'll they'll discover some stuff that's really profound to them, and then they need to kind of sit on that and work on it for a few months or a year. And so they don't want to go back in and talk about it again because it's way too much to take in some brand new idea again. They just want to like spend some time working on what they've heard because they find it truly profound and they want to see how it works throughout their lives. So they didn't lose interest, but a lot of them found what they needed to find and went to go think about and work on that. Um, but Liam just wanted to keep going and going. So we agreed to open up our chat online to whoever at first in Ontario, Canada, wanted to talk about it. And we went on Meetup, and we got listed on the Stoic Fellowship, and we started having meetings with people regularly. First in Ontario, and now we've got a bunch of people from the United States and even from Europe who join in from time to time. And and that was several years ago now, and we've just been doing it once a month regularly since. And uh, as uh, as restrictions around COVID loosened up, we started to do a a month meeting in Toronto as well, where people could come and meet in person. So now we have a once a month online and once a month in person. And strangely enough, those two groups are totally separate with totally separate members. And there's only one or two people who will go to the online one and the in-person one. But a lot of the online people don't necessarily live in Toronto, so they're happy to have that access. And then some people who live in Toronto just go to the in-person one. So yeah, so we've been doing that for a few years now, a few years back, we had the opportunity through the Stoic Fellowship and Modern Stoicism to meet with a bunch of the great thinkers in Stoicism right now. And we had Donald Robertson on our show and Massimo Pigliucci and a bunch of other people. And it's been a ton of fun. Like people have gotten to hear some of the best ideas in Stoicism, and to just talk about where they are in their journey of Stoicism. And maybe I should stop it there before I talk about what we actually do in an individual meeting. I'll let you ask some questions and stop talking, maybe.
Of course. Actually, I was going to ask you about that. What kind of activities you do in those meetings? What kind of, activities you do on a regular basis? And if you could be a little bit specific of when you meet, where you meet, because this could be an opportunity for people who watch this video to know where you're meeting, which days maybe they can attend. This could be an opportunity for people who listen to it to know there's a Stoa in Ontario, they meet these days, and maybe they can join you. So
Yeah,
tell us a little bit
sure.
about it.
Sure. Thank you. The Stoa of Ontario online meets the first Sunday of every month, and it is at 2 p.m. and it goes for 1 hour, 2 p.m. Eastern time. We're in Ontario. And it goes for 1 hour. The in-person version is the third Sunday of every month, and it meets at 1 p.m. for 2 hours.
Amazing.
And so
what do you do there in those meetings? Are you
so
reading right now something? Also, if you can talk about what you're reading now these days, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So just ahead of the meeting, I send out a quote from one of the Stoics, either one of the ancient Stoics or somebody talking about Stoicism today. I think we recently had a William B. Irvine quote as well, and just with that one quote, we'll read it at the beginning of the meeting, and I'll read it a second time so we can just like sit and think about it. And then we see if anybody has any thoughts about that. And then somebody will say what they think, somebody else will say what they think. And from there, we just launch into a discussion about that specific idea, ideas that it connects to, how these ideas have worked in our lives, how we've seen them work out in the world. And you wouldn't think so, but we always get like we're always trying to cram in as much as we can before the end of the hour. Like that's literally it. That's the only prompt at the beginning of the meeting, and we just keep going and exploring. And by the end of the meeting, we're just like, wow! Like look at the ground we've covered. It's really special. We have a really wonderful time with it.
Amazing. And all this from a quote. So you propose a quote and then you explore it deeply.
That's right. Just one quote, and sometimes we're exploring the quote deeply and it makes us think of something else or like how it's connected to another Stoic quote, and we'll mention that. And then we'll see like, oh, why are those two things connected? What do they have in common? What's going on here? And we just all dive into it.
That's interesting. I imagine
what about
that
the in-person meetings are different from these? Or?
The in-person meetings Liam's been leading, and he has been reading his way through Epictetus's handbook, and so he's just going each meeting is one more of the readings from Epictetus's handbook, and then it's the same kind of idea, but he's just going all the way through it, which has been really cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's interesting to use just a quote for the kind of the fodder for a discussion. Imagine that solves some of the problems I've encountered before. I try to keep whatever sort of reading or video or podcast or something relatively short, but sometimes they're a little bit longer. And there's always some percentage of people actually read or listen to or watch the thing. A quote, there's really not much excuse for like, oh, come on, you've got 12 seconds.
And the best part is we don't even assume that anybody's seen it before the meeting. We just read it twice at the beginning of the meeting because sometimes I'll send it out. Sometimes when time gets away from me, I'll send it out 4 hours before the meeting. So it's I it's nice if people have a little bit of, ahead of time to be able to look at it, but not everybody's going to do it. So we just have it at the top of the meeting.
Yeah, that makes sense. So there's obviously the benefit of it being a low barrier to entry in terms of kind of having the context for a particular meeting. Do you have any thoughts or reflections on any other pros and cons to that kind of approach to your meetings?
Yeah. One of the big ones is that a lot of people we get, well, there's really differing varies of differing levels of interest in Stoicism or knowledge of Stoicism. So sometimes we'll get people who have never looked into Stoicism at all, and even with people who have never looked into Stoicism, they can get something from that quote and they can think about how it applies in their lives. And they can listen to the stories of the other people who are saying, like, oh, when I focus on what's in my power, I've learned to be able to let go of the worries that I had about this, and that. And they go, oh, that's a really, powerful insight. And so sometimes in our group, we'll have people who have been deeply studying Stoicism for years and people who have never looked at it at all in the same group talking about the same thing. And because we're focusing on how we've seen it apply in our own lives, everybody has access to their own experience. And this, I think this has allowed us to kind of avoid some of the problems of uh, of different levels of engagement with Stoicism. So, there is no right in our conversations. There's no like right or wrong interpretation of what the Stoics said. It's literally how have you seen something like this playing out in your own life?
Yeah, I guess two things to think about. The two thoughts that brings up. I mean, one is I wonder with some of the newer people who are newer to Stoicism, whether some quotes uh, taken out of context give them sort of the wrong idea, which a lot of Stoic quotes can if you don't kind of have the context for how they mean that. And I imagine that sometimes maybe unwinding those confusions is often part of what you all talk about. People who
What
are more experienced and help fill in the what indifference means.
what's well, what's really interesting about it is that looking at the different ways of understanding the quotes can sometimes illuminate stuff that people who have looked at it for a long time wouldn't have seen. I can remember we had one conversation about somehow the idea of jealousy came up, and jealousy as one of the emotions that is negative and that you don't want to be spending any time in. And a person talked about how they considered jealousy to be helpful because it motivated them. That if they saw something that somebody else had that they wanted, that they then doubled their efforts to go after it. And we were just like, this is fascinating. So what is the difference between jealousy and the things that motivate and drive us? Because then we're forced to go deeper and think about it rather than just dismissing it as like the wrong interpretation of Stoicism. We're like, huh, this is, when is it a negative emotion? I'm sure that the definition of jealousy in Rome 2000 years ago and today might have slightly different contexts. What does jealousy actually mean?
Mm.
Is that drive to like, like Epictetus said, to be like Socrates? Is there jealousy in that? Or is there like a pure version of jealousy, which is an admiration and wanting to be like? And like,
I
so
really
you
like that
actually have
approach.
to look at the
Really
you have
like
to
that
look at the
approach too.
granular of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that you all kind of steer the conversation in such a way that's open to exploring those things, like treating it as like an exploration, in terms of facilitating the conversation, right? Like treating it as this sort of shared exploration and not like just this is the correct version and either you're getting it right or like
Exactly.
I,
But
I yeah.
yeah,
I
Um,
mean, this stuff's 2,000 years old. How could we there's no way we can have an absolute correct version of it. We're just doing the best we can we're like archaeologists of Stoicism trying to like dig out and be like, what do you think they used this for? Like,
And it allows
Exactly,
people to,
yeah.
so go ahead,
I
go ahead.
mean, you were talking before about the time restriction, right? So how did you manage that? Because that happens sometimes in my meetings too. Somebody brings an idea that from the Stoic perspective, I don't think it's so much like interpreting what it meant, but the general idea of uh, being mad or having some kind of craving about something somebody else has, and if it is jealousy, it is not connected to a good emotion, towards the other person. So in my opinion, in my meetings, and I would like you to know how you do it, it's not so much about understanding what they meant, but it means now, right? And
yeah,
in an hour, my meetings are an hour and a half, for example, everybody talking and bringing in stuff. Sometimes it's a little bit challenging, channeling this thing until we get to the Stoic perspective and people understand at least what the Stoics meant, or their approach was to that. So how do you do it, or do you always
that
make it?
so there's a few different things there. One, by only having one quote that we're talking about, it you know it gives us an opportunity, even if we go way off track, to hopefully get some glimpse of what was in there within an hour. Um, uh, Second is sometimes it gets completely derailed. Sometimes it gets completely derailed for an entire hour, and uh, at that point, we I still now always stop at the hour, because I've found that if the conversations that could drag on for hours and hours, um, some of those are the most toxic conversations, that where people just want to yell and argue, and that by sticking to that hour cap, make sure not to indulge some of our worst behaviors. That, like, you know, all right, today didn't work the way we all wanted to necessarily, but like, hours up, let's pick it up next time. And and sometimes in the early days we let it go over if people were really, really interested in doing that back and forth. And some of them got like really heated and toxic and awful. And so we were just like, and it was only ever when we let it go over time. So we were just like, you know what? We're ending at time, and that's it. This way we don't let something spiral into a mess. And we had the same thing at the in-person groups in the early days too. That when we'd go over the 2 hours, when we allowed that, sometimes you'd end up uh, sometimes people will monopolize a conversation because they're really feeling something deeply, and they just want to like work through it and work through it and work through it. But that's not what the group's about. The group is about a shared conversation, looking at something. And like, as much as we'd love to sit there and be with the people, even if one person in the group would really like to sit there and be with the person and work through it, it's not necessarily what's going to work for the rest of the group. And it can be a really, you gotta, in order to strike that balance, we found, cut it off at the time, no matter what's going on. Like, let's wrap it up and say like, hey, this is all the time we've got for this. And then in addition to that, the next month, at the beginning of the meeting, we've got a thing that we read out sometimes when we see that the conversation has spiraled off the month earlier. And I can read it for you here. It's just a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing. Normally, when it spirals off, it's because people are upset about what other people have done, or about what society's doing, or what's in the news, or what's in they or pointing fingers and blame at other people, and and generally, feeling that they're being hard done by. And while there's a place for all of that, and a lot of that is true, it doesn't it's not helping the rest of the people in the group achieve what they want to do in their Stoic journey. So we start off with, before we begin, let's remember why we're here. This group applies the insights of Stoic philosophy to our everyday lives. Let's focus on what's in our control. This is not a forum to point out what's wrong with others, unless we're learning how to deal with those problems within ourselves. It's not to point out what's wrong with society, unless we figure out what we can personally do about it. We are becoming better people, better siblings, better parents, better friends, better thinkers, better workers, and better citizens. In doing that, hopefully, we can then change the world. So
Amazing.
that
Yeah,
And
that's
you
that
nicely
start you
written.
start every meeting with that
we,
setting the ground there.
no, we don't do every meeting with it, because often we'll have some of the same people coming back, and we know what we're doing there. But
Mhm.
every few meetings, and when we get a lot of new people, and when things start to go off the rails, I'll start the next meeting with it. It's too, I don't like to beat people over the head with it and be like, by the way, this is what we're doing in this meeting. It has kind of a chilling effect on the meeting, I feel, if you do it every time. But when I've seen that the meetings have started to spiral, then I'll read it again.
Very good. Yeah, I will
Because I
take
don't,
that
yeah,
again.
I want people to feel, comfortable and free to express themselves. Um, but if it's spiraled off track, then every now and then we need a reminder of, like, hey, we're here to work on ourselves. So, like, if you want to get mad and complain for an entire meeting about yourself, I mean, oh, okay, but most people don't do that, so you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah. That I love that, and I like this idea of having some, at least sometimes, maybe not every time, like you say, that would be maybe a bit heavy-handed, but like at least sometimes having this tone setting at the outset of the meeting, like just kind of getting people into a certain gear with something like that. I mean, that was beautifully written. By the way, I hope you wouldn't mind if perhaps we could like include that in the show notes, the text of that. If
Yeah, not at all. I'll
copyrighted.
enoil it to you. Yeah,
Did
no,
you
no,
write that,
it's
by
all
the way?
good. Yeah,
That's really, really nicely written.
thank you.
Yeah. Um, that's a great idea. And you brought up so many different issues that, Stoa facilitators will have to deal with sometimes, the conversations that go toxic and it's interesting, just that you have that in terms of ways of addressing that. I guess you could think of all of these methods of conversation facilitation of steering things, but I like that you all just like have like a hard stop, and that's one way of just sort of you know,
Yeah,
a less sort of like interventionist sort of way of just saying like, okay, we're off the rails, let's just go.
yeah.
Um,
Well, it sometimes hard interventions go sour. Like, I don't want when people are fired up about something, it's because they care about it, and I don't want to, like, I don't want to say, like, oh, your caring ruins things for everybody. That's not a nice way to do it. There, no, nobody ends up venting for more than, a single session. And then if they come back the next time around and we read this thing at the beginning, everybody, you know, they understand why we're here, and they're here for the same reason as everybody else. Like, uh they want to engage in this stuff, and we all get fired up sometimes. So, like, I don't blame anybody for it in particular, but yeah, that hard out, like, then nobody has to sit through more than an hour of it, and then when we read this thing, hopefully it never happens again.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, another thing you obviously have a lot of experience with here with the group having these different formats over time. This gets to, I think, a thing that people who run these kind of groups are kind of asking themselves, at least in the beginning, is the online versus in person. Um, and it seems like you've run a couple natural experiments with that sort of thing. Like one is just whether it's online or in person. Um, the other is like being basically a circle of friends versus something that uh is on Meetup or whatever and allows people. And I'm curious for one, like how you do advertise the group, but opening it, and especially when your group is on online, had people from other countries and such. This broader kind of uh, semi-public conversation, um, versus a closer knit group of friends where there's a different level of sort of trust and familiarity and that sort of thing. So I would love to hear your thoughts on how those different permutations of a group have gone for you and what you have found has been better or worse for different things.
Sure. They're wildly different. The conversation with friends is nothing like the the conversation with friends, like what we did before, like at the beginning of the pandemic. Um, like there's a level of it's kind of easier with strangers in a way. Like it's everybody has a certain level of respect and professionalism that you bring to the table when you're with people that you don't know that well. Whereas with friends, like trying to create any sort of stable format is right out the window. Like we've known each other too long to take each other that seriously. So so that was so that lasted for a few weeks, and that was it because nobody wanted to come back time and again. Um, uh, so yeah, I I I don't know if I could do we've been doing it once a month for years now, and that would have never worked with friends. We would
Mhm.
we just there no number one, it was that we don't take it ourselves that seriously. But the other one is that thing that I mentioned earlier. Maybe was it before we started recording? I'm not sure. But that sometimes um, you'll get some ideas and you want to take it away for a while and think about it, and you don't want to come back the next month and necessarily talk about it again.
Mhm.
And so if it's just a group of friends, like that's going to happen enough that some months you're just going to have nobody there. By having it open to everybody, we have people who will come for one meeting and then step back for a year and think about it and then come back to another meeting. This has happened to us a bunch of times where just like, they're not coming back every meeting because that's not what they need. They need to come sort an idea out and then take it away and live it for a while because this is a practical philosophy. Um, and so by having it open to everybody, you have some people who want to be there every month. You have some people who can only really um, want to explore these ideas once every few months, and some people just like once a year will drop in and kind of explore a couple of ideas and then take those back and work on them personally.
Friends
So that's
versus,
been
that's friends versus a bigger group. How about online versus in person? Like how's that contrast been for you?
well, online's been super useful for people who don't live in Toronto. Like Ontario is an absolutely huge place that like I say I'm near Toronto. I'm 2.5 hours drive from Toronto. Like that's Ontario is a huge place. And and so to be able to regularly meet despite not living, especially for people who live in rural areas, like there's just nothing, there's no community like that available.
Mhm.
There's not enough people interested in Stoicism to be able to meet monthly. So having it online creates accessibility for people who live outside of major urban areas, for one. Um, for two, the like ability to tune in for an hour and clock out at the end and do that from anywhere is super easy. So like that's nice. And and then as for the actual conversation itself, there is a level of um intimacy with being with people in person
Mhm.
that doesn't exist online, that it seems easier to tackle things in an abstract way online than in person. Because in person, you can like feel everybody's emotions right next to you. And when somebody's exploring something, you're like, there's a lot of respect for their well-being and their emotions that you take into account, which is a great thing. Um, uh, but if you want a quick exploration of ideas with very little emotional baggage, online works really well for that. Now, so those are kind of the pluses of the online version. The in-person version, it's so nice to see people and talk about this stuff, and to have that emotional connection, and to be in the same room with them. There are loads of reasons why being in person is really, really lovely. It's a much closer, deeper connection that you're having with people. It's really wonderful. Um, I don't know, do both. Like, we're doing
Yeah.
both. Like,
That
do
was my
both.
quick sort of
You
follow up
don't
on
need to
that
do
was
either.
you do both. So like I'm
Yeah,
curious, like
yeah,
is that just two separate? You said that there's a little overlap, like because I wonder sometimes about this sort of hybrid thing where it's like, well, all in person we could have done 2,000 years ago, right? Like so
yeah.
what how can we leverage? I mean, obviously the things you talked about with people who don't live in denser areas, that, that makes a lot of sense. Um, but as someone who basically does both, like, how does that work for you? And what do you think about like the ways in which doing some mixture of the two maybe gives us more than either would by itself?
Well, I think if you're trying to force people to do both, you're going to have a hard time, because it seems that some people really want to be in person, and some people want to be or find it much more convenient online. And like, we are in no way, we're not picking up one conversation online that we were doing in person. Like, these groups are almost entirely distinct. So just I don't know. I think if you're trying to force a hybrid model, that might be difficult for people. But if you're willing to accept that some people are only going to do online and some people are only going to do in person, then I mean, it's made no difference to us. We do one online, we do one in person. They're not connected. A couple people go to both. That's fine.
Yeah, especially because you are two, right? You have another, there's another
Yeah,
person in the leadership also who does
yeah,
the other one, right?
that's right.
And I've tried also to do the hybrid thing, and it requires some technology, having the camera,
Oh, yeah.
being
Oh,
able
like if you've got a
to.
group in person and a group online, we've never tried that. That sounds like a nightmare. I've
I've
done it in like
tried, it
community
worked.
meetings and stuff, but like, ugh.
It worked, but it was, I mean, it requires somebody who knows how to put the camera so you can see everybody. And yeah, requires a lot of monitoring and handling. So the
Yeah.
conversation flows, you know what I mean?
And actually one more tiny thing, but from an accessibility point of view, one of the people that was has been regular in our groups found it difficult in person because he has trouble hearing. And so he would like have an app out trying to like transcribe what people were saying in the in-person group. And he just finds it a lot easier online because he's got auto transcribing. So
Uh,
that's a consideration as well. Accessibility online seems to be a lot easier.
Absolutely. You were in the beginning, you were mentioning how people maybe, they go complaining. By the way, I never had that situation in my groups. I've been doing Stoa Madrid for 6 years already. And no complaining so far. Like, people talk about the situation. Actually, I don't know if you get into personal situations, like people are allowed to talk about
Yes.
they are going through, and maybe you go through that a little bit. But I wanted to ask you about maybe it's your personal opinion or the the perception you have of your Stoa, the impact that Stoa Ontario in this case, have in the environment, and maybe not even the impact it has now, but the impact it could have, like the
Yeah.
the Stoa here right now, for example, I'm in Brussels, right? Starting the Stoa Brussels, or Brussels Stoics is going to be called. And it's because I feel it has an impact, and there's something the Stoa should be doing. So in your opinion, what is that?
Well, to your first question, we we only do personal. Like we go deeply personal. Like people talk about like their personal losses, their struggles at work. They're like it's all personal all the time. It's how these ideas are impacting them in their personal lives, how they've used them to overcome things, how they've uh, how they've found certain parts of it difficult. Like we're we're very much looking at how these ideas apply practically in our own lives. So that when getting that personal, you might be right that that might lead to, sometimes it'll trigger hard feelings and you can get onto a rant. Um, but yes, we are focusing on the deeply personal regularly with strangers, which is strange, but works really well for some reason. I don't know. Everybody's been really open and great about it. Um, as for the impacts that we're having, we've had really, really massive impacts personally for people. Like people have mentioned a lot by the end of the hours that that they're having deep personal insights, things that have really helped them significantly in their own lives. Um, what we don't have is like an outward service facing we're not an outward service facing group. I did hear about Stoa Madrid and the things that you've been doing to actually go out into the community and bring some of this into the community, and I think that's fantastic. Like that is really wonderful. We are not nearly that organized. We we are a rotating group of coming and going people that that come and look at the deeply personal effects of Stoicism in their lives. We are not an organized, service-oriented group at all. Though I really admire what you've been doing.
Thank you so much. But would you be interested and I ask you this from the engagement perspective of my role at the Stoic Fellowship. Would you be interested in doing some community service, or you see it, but because you are actually doing it already? I mean, all
Yeah.
this facilitating the possibility that people talk about and reflect on their own lives and talk about their issues and vent, as you said before. That is already community service, in my opinion, right? But maybe
Yeah.
engage in an activity itself, or you see it's going well like this.
Um, the particularly the online one, we're so far flung that it like geographically, I don't know if it makes sense. The in-person one, possibly, because people are already getting together in person. They're physically in the same area. That's possible. Um, I don't know. I'd have to talk to Liam about it and see how he feels about it. But it's tough for me. I'm 2.5 hours out of Toronto as it is. Like to engage in something like that would, I don't know if I'd be a huge help to it. But Liam might be interested in something like that.
Amazing. No, but as I said, you're already having an impact in your community and people who approach to you. And if they are open to share personally, this is something that I also promote a lot at Stoa Madrid, is because they feel comfortable, and that is a good sign, definitely. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And you mentioned Liam. Another thing that jumped out at me in the way you've been doing this is having this sort of I don't know, partner in crime or partner in virtue, like someone who you're sort of co running this thing with, and that's something else that I've thought about as an important factor, I think, in for people who try to run a group like this. I think doing it on your own can become, I know for me, it was still a labor of love, and I still like doing it ultimately, but it became a bit more of a grind and a little hard to maintain the effort and that sort of thing when it's kind of all on your shoulders. And I've someone here in Pittsburgh in our group has the kind of the interest and motivation to be effectively co-running it with me, and there's just having that kind of partner and doing it has been something really enjoyable and helps to sort of avoid, I guess, the sort of burnout that I imagine leads to these groups sometimes kind of like coming to a stop because the organizer just a lot and they
Can't
kind of
take it
Yeah.
anymore.
yeah, and doing it
Yeah.
with someone somehow just makes it more fun. I don't know, and beyond just the logistical help, it's just there's something enjoyable about having a collaborator, and I just wonder
It's
how that's been for you.
it's been great. Like so when we have a tough call, then afterwards we can chat about it and be like, where did this go wrong? How do we then that's how this little write-up came to be, was from the post-game analysis. Just like, okay, what happened here? What did how do we avoid that in the future? And then more often than that, far more often than that, is the call ends, and then we can call each other and go, wow, wasn't that amazing? That was really fun. Oh, this is like, and just to be able to celebrate those great calls as well, and just go, wait, isn't it nice? Like, wasn't it amazing how this person shared this? Oh, wasn't that a deeply insightful thing that this person said? Wasn't, you know, to be able to share in that, just the awesomeness of the after chat of like, oh, hey, wasn't that really cool? That's been really, really good. Um, yeah, the as far as the burnout goes, like after doing this monthly for years now, it's I sometimes I'm just like, okay, oh man, it's the first Sunday's coming up already. Oh, all right, fine, let's do it. And then I go and I do the chat, and it's amazing. And every time I'm just like, why do I ever, why do I ever like, uh, why am I not always excited before this? Sometimes I'm like, all right, here we go. And I finish it, and I'm like, how did I forget? This is amazing. We have like, this is such a great time. We really like, we dig in ideas. Oh, I never thought about these things like that. Oh, this is really great. So, yeah. Yeah, it's more the actual burnout is more just pretend burnout of my brain forgetting how great it is. Maybe it's me. Maybe I haven't looked at enough Stoicism throughout the month that month or something like that. And I'm like, oh, right. I love this. This is amazing.
I think that more or less is how people's brains work for everything that's good for you. Is that like ahead of time you're like, and then afterwards you're like, yay, and somehow you don't.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
humans. Um, but have you
But
ever played with or
I wanted
experimented
to
with
comment
rotating?
just
One sec.
just a little comment here on the burnout you were saying. For example, in my case, I remember there was a moment I was like I can not take it anymore or something. I was maybe doing too many because we usually meet every week, right? I've tried several styles, but every week has been like the most fruitful in my opinion, right? And what I did is I called Greg Lopez, and I said I need like I don't know, somebody to talk to, and they put me in touch with another Stoa that had more experience than me and stuff. And I was able to vent and to talk about this. So there is, I don't know if everybody knows, but there's this like how can we call it, like a counseling program inside of the Stoic Fellowship, and they can find somebody if somebody needs help or somebody needs support with their Stoa. Now with the engagement team, my plan is to support that, because sometimes we need
Nice.
to see another perspective. Why am I remember it was because I was reacting, to some comments about Seneca. Some people tend to criticize Seneca because he was rich and then blah, 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 right? And I found myself like, reacting and like defending the man and the honor of this person who did the best possible. And then I said, there's something weird here. Like I'm not as calm and as, And then I talked with Hunter. I remember Gunter, sorry, I remember his name. And yeah, it helped me. So for everybody there who
Nice.
is listening to this can be also an option, no? Finding somebody in the Stoic Fellowship, in the network to talk to.
I love that.
Nice.
Great idea. And sorry, Kelly's and I are having a little bit of latency, and it's hard to know when sometimes I'm
It's okay.
who's starting talking. Sorry about that. But continuing on the burnout thing and the kind of sharing of responsibility, I something I've daydreamed about and tried to start, and it didn't really take in my group. And I wonder if you've ever tried, Chris, to do like a more of a rotation type of a thing among the members of the group, like that it doesn't necessarily depend on your own heroic Atlas sort of holding up the world single-handedly, that like people take turns, month by month or whatever. Have you ever tried that? Have you ever made that work or even considered it?
No. What we did was made the workload almost non-existent. So by having like uh sometimes we used to have some longer quotes or some more deep insights to things, where I would go and do more research into the quote beforehand, or or when I was organizing and having guests on the show and things like that, the guests on the call, and and yeah, by having it be completely minimalist, like now it's literally just all I have to do is make sure there's a Zoom link and put a quote up. It is nothing now. It is great. And like I go there, and while I do have to moderate the discussion, but like all I have to do is make sure that, you know, I I do some loving kindness meditation beforehand. Just like think like, oh, wouldn't it be everybody in the world just wants to be loved and happy. Isn't it awesome that we're all doing this? Okay, good. Let's go into it. Like it takes all of so uh making it easy has been the main thing to avoid burnout. It's just like, look, this is dead easy. We get on the call, we I read the quote twice. If need be, I read out this little thing that talks about how we're trying to make ourselves better. And then we all guide it together. We're all diving into it together. It's, there's very little heavy handed moderation on my part. I don't need to do a ton. I've made it easy. I've made it easy to run the group. It's on Meetup. The meetups, every 6 months, Liam will put the next 6 months worth of meetups online. Is almost nothing. Really, what's really important is what the people are bringing to the group every month. That's it. And so, like, yeah, that's what's made it really sustainable, is just minimizing how much pre-work needs to go into it. And then, yeah, and then on the day itself, it's wonderful. Like, it's like it when you're actually having a great discussion is no work at all. So that's been that's made it very easy.
Amazing, excellent. I usually like to, and maybe this can caught you by surprise, right? But I'm trying to like put together in these conversations definitions of Stoicism, right? So could you summarize like what Stoicism means to you, for example? Maybe you take a little few seconds, a minute, and organize your idea.
Uh,
And just if I had to share, or you would like to share with somebody, yeah, what Stoicism means to you, how has influenced your life, your role as a leader, for example, in this community you have. Maybe how would you put it?
uh, like if I was to answer cheekily, I'd call it a 2,000-year-old philosophy from ancient Greece and Rome. But what, like, I see what you actually mean, which is like, what does it mean to me? Um, um, Stoicism for me is a framework to live your life where you take responsibility for the way you live. So the big thing is recognizing what's in your power and what you're doing because you've been told to do it, or because you think somebody else wants you to do it, or any number of pressures that you feel you're under. It's a great way to help you kind of throw off the pressures that aren't worthwhile, focus on the pressures that you actually care about, like the bonds of your family and friendship, or even your citizenship. Focus on those pressures that are there that you actually care about, and be able to shed the pressures that you don't care about, like wanting to fit in or be well liked in situations you shouldn't care about, or following trends or things like that. So yeah, Stoicism allows you to focus on what's really important in your life and take responsibility for doing the most you can for those things that you find important.
That's beautifully said. I love it. Yeah, that
Perfectly put.
makes
Thank you.
absolutely. Uh, wow, hard to follow that because, man, transcribe that and read that at the beginning of the meeting. Well, very well put. I love it.
Thanks.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about though was you mentioned that you've had people like Massimo Pigliucci and Don Robertson come in and speak with your group. When again, one of the
Mhm.
pros of the online sort of like format. I don't know if you've
Yes.
been or anything, or if Don was in town.
Yeah.
But, um,
No, I
tell us
should
about that. How
definitely
did
have
that go?
mentioned that
And
as one of the pros. Yeah.
yeah, how did you
It
how
went
did you approach
extremely
them? I imagine
well.
some people would love to do
So
that, but yeah,
I, I can't remember if I reached out to the Stoic Fellowship or Modern Stoicism, or how it went about. I think it was Greg Lopez who helped me out with it, and and it was just like, yeah, when are your times available? I just told him it's once a month on these dates, and he was like, oh, this person might do this day, this person might do this day, and I was just like, this is amazing. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure it was Greg Lopez. Huge help.
did you just email him directly? Like how did you?
I emailed either the Stoic Fellowship or Modern Stoicism. I can't remember. I those two are very close in my brain, and I haven't been able to separate them properly.
Well, he's involved in both, so you might reach him
I
both.
know, I know.
Um,
Uh, but yeah, so yeah, so it's like that. I managed to have speak to Brittany Paula. Like it's been just really wonderful. And so what we did was basically for 6 months, we just had like heavy hitters from modern Stoicism just come in and chat with our group. And and it was basically an ask me anything. Like they would come in, they would say a few things, then people would just ask them about Stoicism. And it was great. So people could get like a deeper understanding about it from a more academic point of view. Because our group is anything but academic. Like I said, some people have never studied Stoicism at all who show up, and we're just looking how these ideas might work in your personal life. Whereas this was like a cool change of pace to be able to get some of the academic side of it.
yeah, that's
Amazing.
interesting because like obviously the academic side isn't the point, but sometimes
No,
actually kind of filling in some of that sort of conceptual knowledge is just fleshing out the framework that you were talking about. Anyway, that's
it's all useful.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all useful.
I love
Absolutely.
that those people like in this field, like no one is such a celebrity that they're not willing to join to their calendars and so booked that they might
That
not
was
be.
great. We'd have like five people there asking
Yeah,
these people
and they love doing
just
it.
like
Yeah.
pointed questions for an hour. And
Mhm.
for those who attended, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I find it inspiring that all these heavy hitters, as you said, right? They are so available to attend the meetings. I saw Madrid, for example. I've had all these people that you've mentioned and others, and they are so willing and available, to talk, to come, to share. So yeah, I find it so stoic, like there's no divas or divos, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, people who are really, really living this and want to talk about it, and they find inspiring also what we do, right? Like bringing all these people in facilitated the place or the opportunity to talk. So yeah, definitely. Do you have any plans for the future? I don't want to ask you about this because by the feeling I'm getting from you and from the Stoa, from the activities you do, I understand that you have done it easy, for you to run, easy for people to join and come, and also you don't chase them when they leave, like, why aren't you coming? And then they come back a year later, right? I'm not sure if I agree 100% with you in that idea of they go and they leave with the idea, and for a year they are reflecting on it, and then they come back. What I found at Stoa Madrid, at least, is people don't have time and they don't probably understand the potential of this to help them with the other issues they are having. So they are so focused on, troubles at work and difficulties in life, and I don't have time, they say, right? But yeah, maybe having these reflections could make them have a different perspective of that lack of time, right? They have, and have another perspective of what they are living. This is the feeling I have, like they live because maybe they didn't gather or also, yeah, we are all struggling with being more, creating habits and being able to be there. I love going to the gym, but I don't go every day because I'm lacking the habit.
And that might be the case sometimes. And but I have heard from people that they have gone away and like really worked on these things and come back. So I mean, it's probably both.
Amazing, amazing to know. Excellent. But I don't know, Patrick, if you want to intervene now. I had this question about, I mean, what advice would you give someone who wants to start a Stoa, for example? I love the way you put it, like it's easy. It doesn't have to be a lot of work. Try to make it as easy for you as possible so you don't get burned out. And so what would be your advice to somebody who wants to start their Stoic journey or a Stoa, even a community?
If you want to start your Stoic journey, read a couple of books and go to a couple of meetings. It's fun and easy. That should be easy enough. If you want to start a Stoa, get on Meetup and the Stoic Fellowship. That's literally all we do. We have done zero advertising. Just the app Meetup is how we organize all of our meetups, and the Stoic Fellowship has us listed on their website. That's it. Like that's choose a day that works for you and do it. There's, and there's a really funny video. I'm not sure if it's still on the Stoic Fellowship website, but we looked at it when we were starting up our Stoa, and there's some guy, I think he's in Vancouver, and he's in a wood shop or something, and he's telling you about how to start a Stoa, and he's like, and then if people show up, great, and if people don't show up, you can just work on being Stoic by yourself. Like, okay. Yeah, it's like I don't know if the video is still up, but it's some old dude in a wood
I haven't
shop
seen it.
Oh, you gotta
just
send that
telling
to
you
me.
like, yeah, it's a fine way to, if people show up, great. If they don't, you can work on being, you can take it stoically.
Oh, you
Okay.
gotta send
It
that to
was
me.
really nice. It was
We'll put that in the show notes too. That's amazing. Well,
No, I haven't seen that clip. I'm gonna check it out.
that's beautiful. On that's maybe that's a good note to end on. We're at about the hour mark here. So unless there's something else you'd like to bring up, Chris, or anything you'd like to point people to who if we missed anything,
uh,
now's your chance.
absolutely, absolutely not. I respect cutting it off at the hour mark.
I'm learning that from you today, eh? That yeah, if you let it longer, weird things happen. So
That's
yeah,
right.
There we go,
That's
walking the
right.
walk. Well, thank you, Chris, for joining us. Chris
thank you so much.
Spaleta,
Yeah,
right?
Spaleta. That's right.
There we go,
Yeah,
got it.
Spaleta.
It was
Yeah.
really, really a pleasure
Great to
talking to
have
you.
you.
Thank you very much for reaching out. I appreciate it. And thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's really wonderful.